What are your first impressions of the digital festival?
Well, we had some really great questions earlier. I think people are excited to use technology to do new things, and it's a very welcoming crowd. It's really well run, by the way, for those of you who haven't been here before. That's super impressive. I think that's kind of legendary here for Switzerland, to have things that are well run and well thought out, and this event is totally delivering on that. So thank you so much for having me.
Over the last 20 years, how did you keep innovating and stay fearless?
Yeah. Well, I think that's really a challenge for us in like every company. We think about user value a lot. So kind of ironically, I think we innovate more by maybe being less excited about what technology can do and more about what the user needs are. And we keep thinking about what more can we do to satisfy a need in the market. And then we go back to seeing what's happening with technology development and how can we incorporate some of these technologies to actually satisfy very practical user needs. Now, as a consumer company, we see needs including like education, information, even entertainment. So we can define that pretty broadly, but we're always very focused on user value, and then we find the way for the technology to meet those needs.
You also mentioned earlier that China is often looked at in binary terms. How, but you argue for a more nuanced view of China and how it does business. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think in general, this doesn't just apply to China, but to any country. If you want to understand a country, it really depends how deep you want to go. If you want to understand the U.S., it's helpful to know English. Try running around the U.S. and not knowing a word of English. It's going to be challenging. You won't know what's being said on the media. You won't know what people are talking about in the coffee shops and things like that. You'll just kind of be guessing. Same thing with China. It's helpful to, if you know Chinese, if you know a little bit about the history, the more able you'll be to understand the country. The thing about China that's hard for many people to understand around the world, especially people who haven't been to China before, it's very hard to conceptualize what a large-scale country is like. I mean, this is a nation probably around 4 times the size of America. It's a large nation itself, 320, 330 million people, and in China you're talking about 1.4 billion. So what is that like to have 4 Americas under one roof with a single language, kind of a unified education system, a unified culture around the whole country? It's very complicated because you're dealing with very large human numbers. And then there's all kinds of debates, right? There's all kinds of things that happen in everyday life in China. And I think it's interesting for people when they start thinking about China just to recognize that, first of all, that it's such a large-scale country with, at the same time, it has a lot of diversity around the nation, but it's at the same time a unified country with a similar language, similar education system, so on and so forth. That's the first thing. The second thing is when you think about China, you have to remember this is a country that has had like remarkable development over the past 20, 30, maybe you could even say like 40 years. So the experience of people in a country like China will be very different from, let's say, Western Europe or the developed world that has kind of achieved a certain standard of living for a long time. In China, change has come very rapidly, and it's been very obvious. You could see it in front of your eyes. You could see the skyscrapers going up and the infrastructure being built. And what you have in China from that is a kind of a mentality in the nation, I think, where things can get done. Big things can happen. Change can be good. It can be positive. And a big challenge like building a bridge or a tunnel or a skyscraper is something very attainable. It is something that actually gets planned, executed, and happens, and then the next thing comes up and the next project is done. And so you have a nation of I'd say, pretty proactive people overall, also very deep science and technology understanding, so people feel empowered by technology. There will be concerns about technology in China just like there is everywhere else, but I think the tendency would be more thinking about how it can empower society, how it can move something forward.
Let's move to human versus tech. What do you see the biggest challenges that humanity will face, and how does technology mitigate those challenges, reduce the challenges, even enhance the challenges?
So I think it's really important to for everyone who works with technology as well as people who are less familiar with technology. Like if you hear a term like artificial intelligence and you're not really sure what it does exactly and how it all works, I think it's important for everyone to step back and realize that these technologies are really very modern tool sets for doing things. I often think of technology as kind of like a hammer or a nail or a screwdriver or a wrench. They're tools for us to do things. With technology, you can build the equivalent of a house. You can build a service, and you can navigate that service, and it provides value to you in the same way that a building does. They're tools to build something, a function that offers value in the society. So the question is, how do we use our tools to do what is most necessary for us to do on Earth? So then you ask yourself, what are the most necessary things to do? And I believe that it's an important time now in history, to the extent that we haven't been good at this for the past couple decades, that we now start thinking more about the fundamental things on Earth that provide services to humans. I talk a lot about food, energy, and water. We call it FEW, where to me this is an example of areas that are absolutely essential for human survival. Agriculture is essential, energy is essential, water is essential, and they're also related to each other. And now with climate change happening, we are seeing that those ecosystems will come under more stress, and also the way we're doing things within those ecosystems, the way we're doing things inside the area of agriculture, energy, actually contributing to the change in our planet. So we have to now be willing to step back and say, how can we do what we do at planetary scale better? How can we phase out these forms of energy that are causing the planet harm to other forms of energy that we know don't cause the planet harm? And then how can we leverage these new technologies we have? Everything from artificial intelligence to mobile, maybe genetic engineering, maybe something like that. These emerging technologies, how can we apply them so they work for us in the way that we need them to work? So how can we use artificial intelligence to make agriculture more efficient? Less waste, more productivity, more crop that we can all benefit from, and reduce the fertilizer, reduce the water, reduce these pollutants that come with the process. These are the kinds of challenges that we need to want to address in the first place at planetary scale, and then we have to foster the development of technologies that take care of that.
What would be some of the, let's call them low-hanging fruits for a budding software developer, a software engineer, to tackle some of these challenges in these ecosystems like FEW?
Yeah, it's a really exciting time for that, because I believe, although we might find it hard to admit sometime, there's a lot of inefficiency in industry, a lot of inefficiency in business. There is so much low-hanging fruit in just making existing processes more efficient. And you could go on and on with examples of how this is the case. But the thing about artificial intelligence, or even these internet technologies, is that you can apply them. And I think we've seen this with some portfolio companies we work with. We've seen this in industry, how just even applying some of these strategies to industry in the short term can get you a benefit of like 10%, 20%, maybe even 30%. Sometimes you can reduce your water usage in a process by 30% just by more intelligently applying these information technology tools, artificial intelligence, towards the process. When you're optimizing a certain outcome, like more food coming off the vine, more productivity, and by actually trying to optimize for that, you might reduce your water usage by 20 or 30% just to make the plants more healthy, meaning that in the status quo situation, farmers tend to give their plants too much water, for example. The farmers want the healthiest plants possible, but just inadvertently they may not have fully realized that they tend to give the plants too much water. So you just optimize for the best result, and you might end up, what we find commonly is you end up using less resources to accomplish your mission. Now when you use less resources, it's obviously good for the planet, but it's also good for profits. So it's a win-win. I think for smart teams working with information technology, targeting industry, it'll be impressive to see how much progress they can make. Then the challenge is getting the meeting with someone in these firms, because that can also take a lot of time. We don't want to change often. We kind of perfect our operating processes around certain assumptions, and the startup team comes in, they're wearing t-shirts, and you're like, how do I trust these guys? They've got 8 months of capital left. Why would I unleash them in my company? And so we kind of often end up stuck, hard to make progress, or the progress that should be made relatively quickly takes a really long time, because years of time often is beyond the time horizon of startup teams. So if you take 3 years and they only have 8 months of capital, what has to happen? Someone has to believe in it and fund it without the projects coming through. This is really the challenge we have now. The low-hanging fruit, I believe, is there throughout so much of global industry. But the challenge is, how do we get more of these things implemented? And how can we get that done quicker? Which should be good for business, but also importantly for the environment.
Very last question. The motto of the Zurich Digital Festival is "Get it done." What does that mean for you?
getting it done. Sometimes you just have to be a little bit rude, I think. Yeah, I think it's okay when you feel like you have a solution that can make a difference in this world. I think it's an important time in history to draw attention to it and to say, guys, this is ridiculous. This solution can save lives if you're in the healthcare space. This solution reduces waste by 20%. Why is nobody adopting this stuff? Like, please understand what this is. Please understand what the technology can do. Can we please move faster? I mean, every case is going to be different, but I think it's an important time to agitate for change, to actually have it be more obvious that these technologies can empower the kind of transition that we need on the planet. There's climate change protests around the world. There's going to be one in Zurich this afternoon. And people need to have faith that there are solutions right under our nose that the hacker team can get involved with. And this is so essential now for the community to have that mindset, like we're a part of the solution. We can start driving certain types of efficiency solutions or other solutions that could actually potentially have a planetary scale impact. And now, why can't we get those meetings that we want? Why can't we get more adoption? Who can help us? Because we're right here. I think this is what we need to have, is more of a mentality like, if it works, if it makes a difference, let's get it done.